to call the Town of Lincoln Council meeting for February 20th, 2018 to order. And I'd ask everyone to stand for the national anthem and remind you that this will be the first time, based on the bill of February 7th, 2018, where the lyrics of the National Anthem of Canada received royal assent. And in doing so, the Government of Canada finalized legislation establishing a new gender neutral anthem. I'm not sure if we all are familiar with the new wording. However, you have all risen. Thank you for that, Mr. Clerk. Thank you. Please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a number of staff in attendance this evening, including Michael Kirkopoulos, our Chief Administrative Officer on my left, William Colossa, the Director of Corporate Services and the Clerk of the Town of Lincoln. We also have Carrie Beattie, the Senior Communications Advisor, and Paul Diani, Economic Development Officer. Kathleen Dale, the Director of Planning and Development, Dave Graham, the Director of Public Works, and Maria Brigantino, the Director of Community Services. Welcome, everyone. Councillors, is there any declaration of interest? We move on. Do any members have any changes to the order of business detailed in the agenda? And we move on to the adoption of the previous council minutes, and that would be the minutes of council's regular meeting of February the 5th, 2018. I have a motion moved by Councillor McMillan and seconded by Councillor Njima that the minutes of the February 5th, 2018 regular meeting of council, including the confidential addendum thereto, be adopted. Are there any errors or omissions? Your pleasure on the motion. The motion is carried. Is there any business arising from the minutes? There being none, we'll move on to the mayor's report. And I only have two items that I wish to touch on tonight. And one of them, it was in relation to the really excellent Politicians' Breakfast. It's an annual event, and it was held last Friday morning and hosted by the Lincoln Chamber of Commerce, and it was held at the Beacon. And all of the politicians, all levels, were represented at the meeting, and there were about 100 people there. And I think that, from what I have heard, the messages were well received. Of course, it's an election for both the provincial government and the local area municipality, so there just may have been a few overtones when it came to the politics of what was going on. But there is a lot of positive momentum in our community, and we certainly wanted to make sure that those messages were very clear to our citizens. Today, I had the opportunity of participating and presenting a bursary to a young woman who lives in Vineland. She attends Blessed Trinity High School, or she did attend Blessed Trinity. She's now in her first year at Guelph University in the Ag program. And she was presented with a $600 bursary, the Ralph Bradley Memorial Bursary, from the Drainage Superintendent Association of Ontario. And her name is Carly Haining, H-A-I-N-I-N-G. And on behalf of Council, Kaylee, I want to congratulate you again for your accomplishment and to wish you all the best in your future. She's really enjoying Guelph. And this bursary is one that the Drainage Superintendents Association, very seldom does it ever go to someone that isn't in the Ag program. Every once in a while, but for the most part, it goes to a student in the Ag program. And that is my report for this evening. There is no regional councillor present this evening. We'll move on to councillor reports. On my left, any councillors that have anything to report? Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a quick one item. I participated in a two-day MPCA strategy session last week, and the strategy that we're putting together right now will run 2017 through 2021, and the plan is to complete the draft, go out for public input, and then wrap up the strategy somewhere in the May-June timeframe. So pretty aggressive timeline, but lots of great input over those 2 days on the MPCA focus for this next 4-year period. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Majima.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Also, I was going to say the Chamber's Politicians Breakfast went over very well, and it's always very well done. I wasn't able to attend. I wasn't well that morning, but a great success, and thank you for your participation in it, and thank you for promoting it. I wanted to talk about another event that the Chamber is putting on, or that the Chamber is involved in, and you can register for this right now if you want. It's the Niagara Chamber Partnership, in partnership with Restaurants Canada, and they are putting on a breakfast forum discussing the impact of Bill 148 and the impact of the new minimum wage and labor relations changes. And that's going on this Thursday morning, February 22nd, 2018, from 8 o'clock till 9:30 at the Best Western Cairncroft Hotel on Lundy's Lane in Niagara Falls. And so you can go on to lincolnchamberofcommerce.ca and register through that link through Constant Contact. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on this side? And on this side, any councillors? Councillor Bernay.
Thank you, Mayor Easton. Very quickly, I just report that on Tuesday, February the 13th, I attended the Region of Niagara for the first Transportation Steering Committee meeting of 2018. Some of the items that were on the agenda were the participation of the Niagara region at the 2018 Toronto International Bike Show. There's over 175 exhibitors that take place in this bike show, and municipalities across Ontario are vying for their little piece of tourism and attraction to their spots. And so the Region of Niagara is, was glad to hear, is really stepping up to the plate and redoing their booth, and hopefully that will go a long way in having a very very important bike show at the Toronto International as well. At that same booth, our active transportation committee members will be down there. So the other things on the agenda for last week's meeting was we reviewed the steering committee draft work plan for 2018. We received an update on the Niagara District airports, and we received an update on the Niagara Transit Committee update. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Councillor Foster?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Easton. Just a quick comment on the politicians' breakfast. And several of us as councillors were there listening to what was being stated and stuff. And I just want to thank you for bringing such a positive and proactive view of what's going on within the municipality. And it's kind of refreshing at times seeing that, even compared to some of the other politicians. I think, as you said, election time is on, and there tends to be a bit of negativity at times going on, but for sure you brought forward a very strong and positive message. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Anyone else? All right, thank you very much, Councillors. Councillor Patrick?
Yeah, sorry, Your Worship. I had the opportunity at the political breakfast to speak with Bruce Timms on Friday. And you had sent an email, Councillor Foster had sent it about a week ago about the Greater Niagara Circle route and wondering where we are on that. And I said to Bruce, the committee hasn't met in over a year because we're waiting for the region's planning staff to approve our asset management plan. So the email I had sent to Bruce had flipped on to the planning department. He said any things like that are helpful. So if you can fan the flames up the region and do what you do with a smiley face, greatly appreciated.
Very good, Councillor. I will do that. All right, thank you. Now, councillors, this evening we have a very special delegation, and the arrangements for this started back in November when I attended the flag raising at the region of Niagara for Louis Riel Day, and that was on November 15th. And I brought the flag back to the town hall, and it was flown actually here for almost 2 weeks. And it was on our special occasion flagpole. But I met our delegate tonight, Chair Brian Kahn from the Métis Nation of the Ontario Niagara Region Métis Council. And I asked him if he would come and speak to us, because I felt that we needed to understand better our heritage. And I think the Métis story is just so deep and so much of who we are as a nation, and the understanding of how it is so separate from other Aboriginal nations. I really felt that we needed to start to learn about this. And Chair Kahn is the perfect person to come and do this, because this is what he does. And I was so surprised that there was actually educators, and he's going to talk about this, because I'm not sure who he's educating, but I thought we could certainly do with an education. So Chair Kahn, welcome. Thank you for coming and sharing some of your wisdom with us. And I understand that it is your sister that lives in Lincoln. Is that correct, or is it? No?
There are some council members that are in the
okay.
area, but
Right.
no,
Not your sister.
not my
Okay.
sister. She
Well,
actually
we
lives in
won't,
Kenora.
We won't spread any rumors. Please, you have the floor.
Well, Mayor Easton, thank you very much. Councillors and staff, thank you for this opportunity to come and speak to you. Yes, this did start back in November, but before I go any further, I do want to stop for a second and acknowledge the lands of the First Peoples of this area, the ones that live by the Treaty of One Dish and One Spoon. That is a concept of you never take more than you need, but you always leave something left over for those that follow behind you. So that is part of the traditional Aboriginal way. This did start back in November. We do have our Louis Riel Day. November 16th is the actual day that we celebrate it. November 15th was the day we held it at the Region this year or last year, because we couldn't get the room on the 16th. So we had to move ahead a day, and that caused a little bit of confusion for some people. Yesterday, we all celebrated Family Day, but the province of Manitoba actually celebrates Louis Riel Day in February. That just ties in with their Family Day. Our day is November 16th. It's an odd day to celebrate. It's actually the day of the anniversary that Louis Riel was executed. So I'm not sure, it's a little bit morbid that we've chosen that particular day, but for whatever reason, it is intended to honor the man. I appreciate the fact that you've allowed me to come here and talk about the Métis people. After the execution of Louis Riel, the Métis people went into hiding. And it was in fact, he said when he was first arrested that his people will sleep for 100 years. And it'll be the artists and the musicians that bring the Métis back to life. And he wasn't far off in his premonition. It wasn't until the 1990s that the Métis Nation of Ontario actually formed. So it was just a little bit more than 100 years that the Métis had almost disappeared from the landscape of Canada's history. So again, the opportunity to come here today and to talk about the Métis is an honor, but it's a duty that I have. And I'll get into a little bit more as I go along. I'm going to take you through a little bit of the history, and then I'll bring you up to date. And if there's time for questions, by all means, feel free. Under Canada's Constitution, there are 3 separate and distinct Aboriginal nations that are acknowledged. The first being the First Nations, many people still refer to as Indians, the Inuit of Northern Canada, and then there's the Métis. And yes, our flag did fly in front of Town Hall here for a few weeks, so thank you very much for that. But a lot of people don't know who the Métis are. And I am an educator. I do have my own business, so this isn't what I do full time. But as a counselor, I've been elected by the citizens of the Métis Nation, and I represent the Niagara region. And so it's, again, as a responsibility that I feel I have to go out and to educate. So I am part of the both district school boards, working with them, ensuring that not only First Nations and Inuit stories are being told, that the Métis story is also being told. But who are the Métis? So we are a separate and distinct Aboriginal group. And we hold on to the term Aboriginal, although the more politically preferred term these days is Indigenous. But under Canada's Constitution, all 3 are referred to as Aboriginal. So we also recognize that we have to hold on to the term Aboriginal. Aboriginal actually really relates to the Aboriginals of Australia. So that's one of the reasons why we're pulling away from it. But the fact is, it is part of our Constitution. So for legal reasons, we will hold on to it. The Métis, we are separate, we are distinct. And it comes from the fact that back when Canada was first being developed by the Europeans, coming over, working the fur trade and traveling throughout Eastern Canada first and then throughout Western Canada, the men that were coming over really couldn't survive if it wasn't for the natives of the land. And it was the women from those communities who actually took charge of the men, provided them with an education on how to survive our Canada landscape, our Canada weather, our Canada winters. They were the ones that taught the men what to eat, what was safe to eat, how to travel, how to negotiate with the other Indigenous communities. As the fur trade was expanding, there was a need to be able to have ways of trade. So it was the women that were teaching the men how to make those opportunities happen. So for me as a Métis man, I am very proud of my ancestry, but I'm most proud of the Métis women that I come from. Because if it wasn't for them, those men would not have survived. Canada would not have been developed in the way that it was. So I do celebrate the women. Métis, though, are not just half-breeds. So we are a mix of European and Indigenous women, European men, Indigenous women. And originally, the first children that were born from those unions were referred to as half-breeds. or mixed bloods, or Canada-born. That's the way that they were referred to in many legal documents. But over time, more and more of these half-breeds were being born, and these half-breeds were marrying other half-breeds, and over time, there was communities that were being developed that were very specific to this special group of individuals. We weren't really accepted by the Europeans any longer because we had the native blood. We were no longer really accepted by the natives because we had the European blood. So it was a little bit of a challenge, and so many of the Métis communities that developed were out of a need that neither of the two original groups really wanted us around because we weren't pure of blood. So it was a little bit interesting. So originally we were half-breeds, mixed bloods, Canadian-born. But over time, we started to form our own communities, have our own culture, our own language. There's a language called Michif, which has almost disappeared from all records. There's only about 400 people in all of Canada who speak Michif. And when I talk about Métis, Métis are really only in Canada. The United States asked the Métis people that when the United States was being formed, they had to make a decision. You either lived as the Europeans, as the white man, or you lived as the natives. And so the whole concept of Métis and the mixed bloods actually almost disappeared. But over time in Canada, we did have our own communities, our own languages. As I say, Michif almost is completely gone. It's an interesting language. It's a mix of French. It's a mix of some Scottish dialects that come through. It's a mix of, depending on which Aboriginal community that the mix happened. I myself am English Cree. Derek Pont, who is our council president, is French Cree. So his Michif language from his family would have been different than my Michif language from my family. So that's caused a little bit of the reason why the language is being lost. This might be a family portrait, I'm not sure. My family actually worked for the Hudson Bay Company. The first ancestor that I can trace back from European roots was 13 years of age when he came to Canada by himself, working as a scribe for the Hudson Bay Company, and eventually worked his way up through the company and was a governor for the Hudson Bay over time. But he was working out of Moose Factory originally. So I do say that with a bit of tongue-in-cheek, and there is a gentleman that has a beard that somewhat looks like me, so perhaps it really is a family portrait that we're looking at here. The Métis were a big part of the fur trade. Many people say that it was the railway that really expanded Canada. No, it wasn't. It was the little beaver that caused Canada to expand further and further west. In Europe, it was the fashion to have the top hats with the beaver pelt. And there were no more beaver in Europe, so they were coming over to Canada to trap them and to hunt them. So that's really what pushed Canada further and further west. The Métis, again, a mix of European, whether it's French or English or Scottish or German, and a mixture of the native women. We did a lot of traveling in these areas by canoe. There were two different sizes of canoe. One of them was 37 feet long. They were heavily packed. When they were packed to their fullest, apparently there was only about 6 inches left of space. In order to be a good Métis voyageur, somebody, a fur trapper, you had to be strong, you had to be small, so I wouldn't have been a good fur trapper, I'm too big, because you needed to fit, the more space the men took up, the less space there was for the furs. So they were looking for strong, small men, about 5'4", actually. You had to be a good singer, so that took me out on 2 accounts. I'm too big, and you do not want to hear me sing. Again, the two different sizes of canoes, especially in this area, the waterways was a big part of the Métis culture. As we moved further west, we ran out of water, so we started to travel by ox cart and the Red River cart, so some of you may be familiar with that. These carts were totally made out of wood and sinew and leather, so there were no metal components holding it together, and you couldn't grease the wheels. So in fact, you could hear these carts coming for miles in advance because it was wood on wood squealing against one another. But it was the only way to travel. If they greased the axles, the dust from the prairie started to fill it up, and it would actually bung up the carts, so they couldn't move. I am from, well, I have ancestry that starts at Moose Factory, so I started in Ontario apparently, but I do have roots also in Manitoba, and that's actually what I knew more about my history was through Lower Fort Garry. And with that, it was on the prairies, it was a big thing to have the buffalo hunt. And the Métis were famous for their buffalo hunts. There could be up to 1,000 people traveling with those ox carts or the Red River carts, gathering together. Because of our connection with the Europeans, we had access to rifles earlier than many other Indigenous communities. And so we were more efficient at riding. But these were not the guns of today. These were the guns where you had to put in the shot and the bullet and pound it down and then shoot. And what the men would do was actually they would have the bullets in their mouths as they rode the horses. And as they shot, they would reload and spit the bullet into the gun and then ram it down and be ready for the next shot. So they were good horsemen as well. My in-laws actually live along what's called the Buffalo Jump. And it's a flat area of land, and it's right near a river. And just before the river, there's what's called a cut bank. And the buffalo would actually be driven over the cliff, and it was easier to capture them that way. So I actually have a lot of arrowheads, et cetera, from my in-laws as a result of some bad shots that I guess were made along the way and left on the ground. Many of us are known by our sash. So I'm wearing a sash. You can't see it because I'm seated. But the Métis are really known for our sash. It's one of our symbols that we use to actually identify who we are. And when we gather, we do know who's Métis and who are the spouses of the Métis based on who's wearing the sashes and who's not. The sash has a number of purposes. One, if you wear it tied to the left, you're married. If you tie it to the right, you're free and available. So there's one clue. It was also one of the first aid kits. Again, thinking about the men out in the woods or along the waterways. And if they broke a limb or needed to splint up bones, they would get the 2 pieces of wood and use the sash to actually tie them up and create the splint. It was also used as a sling. And for those that were unfortunate who had some significant cuts, it was also part of the sewing kit that you could use to give yourself stitches if you needed to. So it had a lot of different purposes. The men were required to carry a minimum of 2 bundles of fur as they portage. So they're in the water, they're in the canoes, but eventually you hit land. And so you have to carry what you had in the canoe over land, and it was a requirement that you were able to carry at least 2 bundles, and each bundle weighed 90 pounds. So a minimum of 180 pounds each man carried. As a result, there were a lot of hernias. There's stories of some men carrying up to 5 bundles, so 450 pounds at a time. Again, hernias were a big thing. The sash helped keep everything together. You did fly our flag, so it is the infinity symbol. There's a number of stories as to what that actually represents, but from the proud Métis Nation, we're saying that it's the fact that it's the coming together of 2 worlds. The Indigenous community, the European community coming together, and that the Métis people were actually here forever. We are part of the infinity. There's also stories that if you think about the Scottish flag, and again, there are a lot of Scottish Métis people, that this actually is a take on the blue and cross Scottish flag. So that's a possibility as well. We do have, you may see sometimes there's a red flag, there's a blue flag. Typically, it would depend actually which company you work for. There were 2 companies that were part of the fur trade, the Northwest Company out of Montreal and the Hudson Bay Company out of England. And if you worked for the Hudson Bay Company, you wore a red sash and you flew the red flag. If you were from the Northwest Company, you had a blue sash and you flew the blue flag. These days, Ontario has selected the blue flag as our official flag, and I'm not sure how this happened, but the red flag is actually listed as our war flag. So if you do see that at any of our encampments, you know we're angry. So either works. There's some stories as to why there's the difference. There is the difference between whether you work for the Hudson Bay or the Northwest Company. There's other stories that say, well, it all came down to what fabrics were available. As the ships were coming over from Europe, there were only certain fabrics available. So one shipment it may have been red, the next shipment it may have been blue. We're just thankful that there wasn't a surplus of tartan in any one particular year. The Métis are known for their music. Again, when you think of the men that were out in those canoes, they worked 14-hour days. They stroked at an average rate of 45 strokes a minute. They would travel up to 100 miles a day along the waterways. So the music, again, they had to have ways to keep themselves entertained and to keep the stroke up. So the singing was a big part of it. Couldn't have a lot of room for a cello or a guitar, so the fiddle was the instrument of choice. That or spoons or a mouth harp were another. So along with that, though, is our dance. It's known as the jig. So if any of you are old enough to remember the Beverly Hillbillies, there was the jig that Jed Clampett was famous for dancing, and that's pretty much the jig that the Métis were known for. The celebrations, because these men were out for 3 or 4 months at a time, and they would come together at certain meeting points, there was always a big celebration, and it didn't matter that it was all men. There was dancing, there was music, there was song, there was drink. And sometimes the dancing could go on for days, nonstop. Again, it was a chance to get together. So the Métis are also known for their celebratory dance that they have done. I cannot jig, but it does look like it's fun. We're also known for our beadwork. So many First Nations and Inuit are known for the elaborate decorations that they put on their possessions. But because we had access to the European trade earlier than some of our brothers and sisters from other parts of the Indigenous community, our decorating became more colorful and more elaborate. So I have beads on my vest that I'm wearing today, but the Métis are really known for a more free form. So what you see on these gloves are a typical style of beadwork that was done. The Métis were known as the flower beadwork people because, again, all of a sudden we went from the traditional porcupine quills and seeds and shells that were kind of bland to the bright colors of the blues, the reds, the green. So the men were also known as the peacocks of the prairie because of the way they decorated their clothes. And everything got decorated. If you had a horse, the saddle was decorated. If you had a dog, the dog was decorated. Your gloves, your vest, your pants, everything was decorated with beads. The more beads you had, the more successful you were presenting yourself to be because you had time for someone in your family to do beadwork on your behalf. And in fact, I am part of a Métis group of individuals who are reviving the beadwork, but in a new format. I actually do what's called dot art. So my paintings that I do are fairly large paintings, but they're done dot by dot, and they're replicating the beadwork that you would find on many of the clothing of the Métis people previously. I can't bead worth a hoot, so I wanted to honor the tradition as best I could, so I took up dot art as an art form. The Métis in the Niagara area were part of the War of 1812. Oftentimes the Métis are forgotten when we talk about Canada's history. And even with the Truth and Reconciliation and the apologies that were made, oftentimes there was the overlooking of the Métis, who were very much part of the residential school system and the 60s scoop. And at the same time, we were part of the War of 1812. So I'm proud to say that the Landscape of Nations that was put together 2 years ago in Queenston actually does acknowledge the Métis as being a part of the War of 1812. And the Canadian government also actually has as well and has gifted us a special flag from the War of 1812. We were the ones that went out and led the soldiers to where they needed to go, but we were also the ones that did the hunting for them so that they could concentrate on what they needed to, but when they came back, they had food and furs and things to keep them warm and to feed them. This all started, again, the discussion was about Louis Riel. He was probably the strongest Métis leader that we have in our history. There have been a number over time, and in particular in the 1800s there were a few. Gabriel Dumont is another. But Louis Riel was the one that rose to the top. He was the one that was the thorn in the side of the Canadian government. He actually was elected to Parliament, And part of being a member of Parliament, you have to go in and sign the registry. And his signature is on the registry, although he never sat as part of Parliament. There was a price on his head, so he couldn't really go there and sit with everyone else. But he did sneak in at night and sign the registry, so he's officially a member of Parliament. But in 1885, there was a battle in Saskatchewan, the Battle of Batoche. And it was a massacre of the Métis people. And at that time, as a result of that, the Métis did go into hiding. And about 5 months later, Louis Riel was hanged for treason, which was on November 16th, 1885. So again, it's kind of odd that in Ontario we do celebrate that day, but it's not so much the fact that it's his death, it's what he did. Louis Riel, traitor, not a traitor, depends on when you went to school. I know that when I went to school, he was listed as a traitor. And when I talk to people who have the same color of beard or hair color that I have in my beard, they often refer to Louis Riel as a traitor. But there is a movement to recognize him as a leader in Canada. Because of what he did, he actually kept Manitoba as part of Canada. It was very close to becoming part of the United States. So he did negotiate and keep Manitoba and Northwest part of Canada as part of this country. Louis Riel Day, November 16th, we do have a Rose Among the Thorns. So we did invite the mayors to come out to a special celebration where we had some cultural opportunity to share who we are, explain who we are, have some activities, a little bit of dancing, a little bit of fiddle playing. And we did gift the flags to each of the mayors. And the mayors that weren't able to get there, we did hand them out separately at a different event. And so everyone throughout the region did fly the flag throughout the week of November 16th, and you did here as well, so thank you very much for that. Paul Grenier and Vance Badaway, not only politicians, but they're also Métis citizens, so they're good supporters of ours. Bringing you up to more modern times, there's just under 400,000 Métis citizens across Canada. About 86,000 of those are in the province of Ontario. As far as our government goes, we do have our own government. I am a councillor of the Niagara Region Métis Council, but we do have a provincial government as well. And our province is divided into 9 regions, so there are representatives from 9 regions who do sit on the provincial council. We also include senators. Our senators are not the same as the Canadian senators. Our senators are actually our knowledge keepers and our spiritual leaders. So when we start meetings, there's often a prayer that starts off our meetings, and it's the senators that lead them. So we do have 4 provincial senators, and the youth are very important, so we do have a youth representative. Throughout the province, we have 30 different chartered community offices. So Niagara Region is only one of 30, London, Ontario being the most recent one. We do have what's called the MNO Secretariat, so the Métis Nation of Ontario. So we're not only our own government, we're not only a cultural community, but we also look after our own. So we do have staff who are involved with health, diabetes care, early child year care, education. We help with housing. We help with, in cases where there's low income, we also help with meal preparation and food sources, et cetera. And we also work with a lot of businesses. As they're developing the land and using up the resources, they're coming to us to see how that's having an impact on our traditional way of life. So there is a recognition that the Métis are around, First Nations are around, Inuit are around. And so businesses and governments are starting to come to us. The first time you may have heard about us from a legal perspective, there's 3 legal cases that have surfaced in the past couple of decades. The first being the Pali case, and that was where Métis citizens went out in a Métis community near Sault Ste. Marie, sorry, and went moose hunting, and they were charged for hunting moose out of season, and they proclaimed that this was part of their heritage, their right as Aboriginal people to do so. And it took a few years in the courts, but eventually it was won, and so the Métis citizens do actually have the right to harvest, but we have to harvest in our traditional lands. So there are no traditional hunting grounds in Niagara, so you won't see anyone hunting around here, at least not as part of the Métis Nation. We have to go back, so in my case, I would have to go back up to Moose Factory if I was a hunter. I am not a hunter. But there are some very specific rules about how we can claim our heritage rights. Back in 2015, the Ontario government was the first to recognize us that we operate as a government, but we're not a full government, and we're not a charity. So there is the Not-for-Profit Act in the province of Ontario. So there are certain rules that we have to follow, but we're not truly a not-for-profit agency. So the Secretariat Act actually allows for some idiosyncrasies between the way we operate versus the way a charity would have to operate. So that was good on Ontario. They were the first province to have any kind of recognition of the Métis people as a viable part of the community, of the political community. And then the Daniels case, also in 2016, so a few months later. And that was the one where finally the federal government has acknowledged that the Métis people are part of Canada's culture. In the past, the federal government said you're a provincial issue. The province said, well, no, you're Indian, so you're part of the federal issue. And so we were falling through the cracks. We're not part of the reserves, so we're not part of treaties, sorry, we're not part of the treaties. And so they didn't quite know how to deal with us. So it took 17 years, but finally in April of 2016, the Supreme Court did actually acknowledge that we are the responsibility of the federal government. And one of the things that does, it does provide our veterans with some acknowledgement, because previously as a Métis veteran, you weren't accepted in under any of the local legions, because you weren't, the Métis were not part of the federal government. So we weren't recognized, so therefore our soldiers, our veterans were not allowed to go into the legions. So if nothing else, that's one way that we're truly honoring what the Métis people have done in protecting Canada, as well as worldwide. So there's a number of benefits for us being now part of the federal government's acknowledgement. If you go back to the 1800s, as Canada was actually being formed, there were promises made for the Métis, but it was kind of, here's what we're promising, but we'll get back to you later. Well, it's been 150 years, and they're only now starting to get back to us, but they are, so that's very positive. So the Daniels case is really an exciting time for us. The Métis Nation of Ontario, the Niagara Region Métis Council. Two different levels of government. We do have a national organization, but because of the politics, it is preferred that each nation is recognized in each province. So there is the Métis Nation of Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, British Columbia, Ontario. You won't find Métis further east. Partly because you have to be able to tie your family records back to Canada before Canada was Canada. And in the East, it was so early, there were no real records, so they can't prove or document their heritage the way that we can in Ontario and further west in Manitoba. So with that, I did take up probably more than my time. I do appreciate all of you listening to what I had to say. There's much more. The Métis are a fascinating group of people, and I hope that at some point we come out to Fort Erie or Fort George or Fort Erie during some of the events during the summertime, because we do have encampments there, and we live like they did in the 1800s. So you will see us there. I tell friends and family, come, it's like coming to the zoo, except we're the animals that you're watching. We're carrying out our day as if it was the 1810s, 1812s. And you can come up and ask us questions and see the way that we really lived back then. But if you have any questions, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor, and thank you for being here. It's been most interesting. In fact, it reminds me of some history courses that I taught years and years and years ago, particularly when you're talking about the importance of the beaver in the growth and the development of Canada and the fur trade. My question is that the term that comes to mind is the coureur de bois. And is that a term that would that would include the Métis, or was that some of the other Indigenous peoples?
No, that was truly the Métis. The Coeur d'Ivoire, the runners of the woods.
Yes.
They were also referred to as the Bois Brûlés, so it was referring to the dark skin that they had. One of the interesting parts, nowadays the Métis people are actually known as the Rainbow people, in part because many of us, because of our European heritage, some of us are blonde, blue-eyed, but very much part of the Indigenous community. So it's sometimes a little bit harder to pick out in a crowd the Métis individuals, but that's also one of the reasons why the Métis almost disappeared, is because we did blend in with many other communities, and it was definitely not in your favor to be recognized as a Métis individual, especially after Louis Riel was executed. But yes, there were a variety of names, pork eaters. Most of the terms were actually derogatory, but that was common in the time. When you're referring to the Indigenous people, there were often those types of terms. But Bois Brûlés and Coeur de Bois, runners of the woods, that one in particular, that shows a little bit of strength and courage of the men at the time. Although I will say, I talk about the men of the fur trade, but again, remember it was the women from the First Nations who actually taught the men how to live and how to survive.
I think I can still picture one of the maps in a textbook of the route that the Courrier du Bois took from Manitoba through all the waterways and into the Ottawa River and right up to Montreal. Very interesting. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
Councillor Njima?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. When you were talking, I thought of earlier on this year, it was actually 2017 in the fall, we had Mark Zielinski that came to our museum, and he showed his book, The Heart of Turtle Island, and some very powerful imagery in there. And I thought of that when you were talking about the celebration of nations. He had pictures of that and talked about how the local limestone was used in those statues that were put up down there. So that's what I'm seeing. I'm seeing that through this. So I was looking at your art on your website.
Oh, you found me.
I did. I found you pretty quickly. And the two that really, I mean, they're all beautiful. Oh, where'd it go? They're all beautiful, but the ones that stick out to me, and so what I'm saying out of all this is I see a thread through all this that imagery is very powerful, and I find that when I see something visually and people tell me a story, I remember it. And so you made me think of Mark Zielinski. Mark Zielinski made me think of all kinds of things that comes up on a regular basis. But you're forgotten that acrylic on canvas, which is about the tribute to the children who were sent to the residential schools. That one really resonates with me when I look at it. I understand what it's about by looking at it. And also your tribute to Louis Riel is just gorgeous.
Thank you. That one's in my wife's office. The other one that's there is the red dress, Echoes of Silence. And that one actually, my work is normally done on black canvas, and it's replicating the beadwork. So there's a left and a right-hand side, so you'll see a mirror image. But the one that's forgotten it's unique. It's on orange to represent the Orange T-shirt Day that the children in the schools celebrate. And in that one, every flower is unique, and that's to show the individuality of each of the children. And there's a dream catcher that's fading off into the distance, so it's showing a loss of their heritage. And at the bottom is actually a 2-row wampum belt, which was the original promise between the Europeans and the Indigenous people, that they would travel together down the waterways in 2 separate canoes, never interfere with each other's lives. So that one was actually a very emotional one. So thank you for acknowledging that particular piece.
Councillor Timmers?
Oh,
I'm
sorry. I just want to say one more thing. So am I right when I say that imagery is a very important part of the Métis culture, color and imagery?
Oh, definitely. And it's more than anything, it's a celebration. It's a celebration of Mother Earth and all that she has to offer. So we're celebrating the beauty, except for the forgotten one. It's really celebrating the beauty that Mother Earth has to offer.
So that also reminds me of something that a delegation that we had to the Sports, Recreation and Culture Committee last week, the Niagara Barn Quilt Trail. So it's a similar idea to celebrate our culture through color. And we had a delegation come to talk about these quilts that are being created and put on the sides of buildings all along through different communities. And
Wonderful.
so I thank you very much for your delegation.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Timmers?
Thank you, Mayor Easton. Thank you very much for coming in tonight, and I really got a whole education, and a lot of it did take me back. I remember the school projects, and some of the things that you were talking about, but I really didn't know the detail, and I didn't understand about the sash. I didn't know that. I also wondered about how you were governed. That I had no idea about. And so thank you very much for enlightening us. I actually know Derek Pont, and when he was running in the election, he was, putting some pictures out there, and it was brand new to me. I really didn't know very much. So after tonight, I have a very clear understanding of the Métis culture, and really appreciate you coming in tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for paying attention to, again, the Métis are a forgotten people in many ways. And so these acknowledgements today are very important for our whole community. So I'm lucky to be sitting here, so thank you.
Councillor Thompson?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. Just thanks again for coming in. I too got some education this evening, and I'm very pleased to hear all these interesting little facts. I'd never heard the term 60s scoop before. I've always just heard about the residential school system, and I was unaware that the Métis were a part of that as well.
Yeah.
And I really related to the fact that you spoke that that your culture is about the matriarchal sort of framework, and that's a very Indigenous in nature. I know based on my ex-mother-in-law and whatnot, with her being Indigenous, and that sort of theme comes through in that direction as well. So I really appreciate you coming and educating us on this.
Well, thank you.
And
The 60 scoop, there's a lot of negative in Canada's history when we look at the Indigenous people, and a lot is being done now with the Truth and Reconciliation. And so being able to come here today and tell you a little bit about the other side of Canada's history, because it wasn't taught in the schools. When I went to school, it wasn't taught in the schools when my children went to school. I'm very pleased to say, though, that right across the province, the Ministry of Education and the various school boards, and in particular in the Niagara region, are really pushing for a greater understanding of a different part of Canada's history. There's a whole other area that you can look into and learn about. So there was some negative, but there's also a lot of positive, and that's where we're headed. And the opportunity to speak like this today has definitely taken us into the positive. So thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Chair Khan, and the relevance of the history as you describe it and your willingness to include these stories, even though many of them come from a very dark place, is very helpful to us. And I hope that councils and politicians will continue to raise awareness. Certainly, this resonated with our council. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
It was a wonderful opportunity, so I do thank each and every one of you. You've been most accommodating throughout this entire process, and definitely have felt like this was a presentation that was wanted. So again, thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Councillors, we have no correspondence this evening. We'll move on to the reports section and begin with Sport, Recreation and Culture Committee. I have a motion moved by Councillor Benjima and seconded by Councillor McMillan that the minutes of February 7th, 2018 Sport, Recreation and Culture Committee be adopted and the recommendations contained therein be approved and acted upon. Councillor Benjima, would you please provide highlights of the meeting?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The following are highlights regarding the Town of Lincoln's Sport, Recreation and Culture Committee meeting held on February 7th, 2018. here in the council chambers. Full details regarding the meeting can be found in the agenda and minutes published on the town's website, lincoln.ca. We first received a presentation from Bill Hodgson and Peter Merritt introducing the concept of a Niagara Quilt Barn Trail. Interesting, and I think you've read about it in the paper. There was a write-up on it recently in the paper. You can find more information by looking, again, at lincoln.ca in the agenda package. And then under delegations, we had Harold Teal and Chris Smith from the 20 Valley Tourism Association provide comments regarding report PL 1803, the special events policy. This policy has been on our plate for about 5 years, and the goal has always been to be proactive and to facilitate communication among all interested parties, and was always to support these events because we see them as community building initiatives and important economic drivers. So the process went on for quite a while. It went back and forth, and it was tweaked. It wasn't perfect. It's gotten better and better along the way. So thank you very much to staff for listening and for engaging the community and reworking the content of the bylaw and coming up with something that was clearly more palatable to the community and to some of the people that are putting on these events that felt that the original document was a bit of a hardship. What we heard by the end of the night was that people are pretty satisfied with, by and large, what they're seeing in the document. And as it rolls out and as we see how it plays out, it's open to more massaging, and we'll do that as we go along. Correspondence was received from the Municipal Heritage Committee requesting support for the federal tax credit for heritage buildings on the Canadian Register of Historic Places. After that, we also received a report regarding the heritage designation of the former Camden Trinity Evangelical United Brethren Church. A lot of good work in communication between staff and the owners of that property, who are in favor of having further discussions and looking at ways that they can preserve the heritage value of their property. Then we looked at the Community Services Action Plan. So staff and the Director of Community Services spent I'd say the better part of 2017 looking at the organization within the Community Services Department and coming up with a strong go-forward plan. Some of the things we'll look forward to hearing about are the Community Services Renaissance Plan and a customer service strategy. The meeting wrapped up at 9:15 p.m. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Committee members, are there any questions? There being none, pleasure on the motion. The motion is carried. Chair Thompson, would you care to provide the highlights of the planning meeting of February 12th?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'm going to provide highlights of the meeting of the Town of Lincoln Planning Committee for February 12th. It was held here in Chambers. The meeting commenced with 2 public hearings regarding zoning bylaw amendment applications. The first was to consider a temporary use as a greenhouse, and the second was to permit the construction for a storage facility. A number of members of the community attended and addressed committee regarding a variety of issues, all of which will be considered by staff as ongoing review of the applications continue. Committee then dealt with the following reports, addressing matters including PL 1806, which is the building activity report for October to December 2017 and 2016 over 2017 comparisons. PL 1807, which is Bill 7, Promoting Affordable Housing Act 2017. It was the provincial release of the draft inclusionary zoning regulations. And then we went on to PL 1808, which is Bill 139, which was Building Better Communities and Conserving Watersheds Act. We also had a report from the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority and the Niagara Regional Protocol and Memorandum of Understanding update. We also had a report from Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, draft guideline on community emissions reduction planning. We had PL 1811, which was a discharge of site plan agreement. And then we received a 2017 activity and a 2018 work plan presentation by Associate Director Bruder, as Director Dale was ill that evening, and Matt did a fine job of that. So committee wrapped up at about 9 o'clock. And if you're looking for more information, certainly you can check the website at lincoln.ca for more details.
All right, thank you very much, Councillor. I'll read the motion. I have a motion moved by... Do you have a question? Yes. I'm going to read the motion first. I have a motion moved by Councillor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Foster that the minutes of the February 12, 2018 Planning Committee be adopted and the recommendations contained therein be approved and acted upon. Questions? Councillor Njima.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. My question is about the Bill 139. I've been reading quite a bit about the bill and how the changes to our planning processes are going to take place through that bill in Ontario. So I'm wondering, it's going to be pretty important, I think, for council and the decisions that we're going to be making in the long run regarding regarding any kind of planning applications. So do we have any, I guess through you, Madam Mayor, to the CAO or anybody who might be able to answer this question, do we have plans to further discussion on that bill and the implications?
Mr. Koppes.
Education around it?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I think it relates to education, and that's exactly where I was going to go, Councillor Rajima. Staff will look at developing an education session for council where we can provide some information. I'm going to ask Director Dale to maybe provide some specific timelines or instances that planning staff are looking at relative to the bill and anything they may be bringing forward.
Through you, Madam Mayor, this particular bill, what it does is part of the process. It's changing the process for appeals. So instead of the Intermunicipal Board, it'll be called the Local Planning Appeal Board. One of the things that we have been doing is any of the, I don't know if council's noticed, but some of the recent notices that have gone out have an extra paragraph in them talking about how the appeal process might change. It's going to change some of the timeframes for making a decision. So once, at this point, this is put forward, it has been approved, but it's not yet enacted. So once we have further details, we can provide a further update to committee and council.
Okay, thank you. It's going to be really important in the long run that council and planning committee really have a strong understanding of provincial policy. That's going to be key in the decisions that we make. So I'm looking forward to discussing that bill further and its implications once it's proclaimed.
Okay, thank you very much. That answers your question. I think there's another element here regarding knowledge of the public, which is very important. I'm not concerned about the planning staff. They'll know, but certainly an understanding by the community is it's going to be pretty important. Any other questions? Your pleasure on the motion. The motion is carried. And Chair Brunet, would you kindly provide highlights of the infrastructure meeting?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The following are highlights regarding the minutes of the Infrastructure Committee held on February 14th, 2018. Director Graham and the Manager of Environmental Services, Jillian Harris, provided the committee an overview on Report PW 1803, including a PowerPoint presentation detailing the Ministry of the Environment 2017 inspection report for the Beamsville and the Jordan Vineland water distribution systems. Members reviewed the distribution and the water loss data, water quality reports, water consumption trends, and the town's backflow prevention program. Members then considered information presented by the Manager of Environmental Services, and discussion surrounded a number of water-related issues, including the importance of developing and implementing programs to allow the agricultural community access to potable water, the importance of ensuring 100% compliance within the town's backflow prevention program, the next steps in the Vineland West private water system. We talked about later on in the evening the development of the new secondary school for West Niagara and the impact it would have on upcoming capital projects. And we were informed that the regional staff have been invited to our April Infrastructure Committee meeting to discuss the town's developmental priorities. Later on, we discussed the tender results. Council will recall we had a couple of infrastructure tenders that closed in the late fall of 2017, which were over budget. So the good news is we reviewed the tenders for the Academy Street Road Reconstruction Project, the Charles Street and William Street Storm Sewer Realignment Project, and the Moyer Road Culvert Replacement Project at this meeting. And as a result of Council's early adoption of the town's 2018 budget, Public Works has been able to secure contracts at very good construction rates early in the season, so that's great news. Full details regarding the meeting can be found in the agenda and minutes published on the town's website. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I have a motion moved by Councillor Timmers and seconded by Councillor Brunet that the minutes of the February 14th, 2018 Infrastructure Committee meeting be adopted and the recommendations contained therein be approved and acted upon. Other questions? Councillor Foster.
Yes, thank you. Just a comment, and I hope Councillor McMillan can echo this as well. It's such a good news story that we get concerning the water system here within the municipality. You know, we're coming in, Dave and the team have done a top-notch job of getting us to where we are. And even other areas of the municipality, the billing of water through the municipality has been completely, like the problems we had from years ago have been all but gone and disappeared. And some of the losses of water, I mean, when I first came on council, we were talking about a system that was losing 25% of the water. So the investments that have gone into play and have been going in play are really truly showing us that that we've been on the right track with this. So this is the type of report that comes back in and through and really truly needs to be shown as an extreme positive for the municipality. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I guess it just goes to prove that when those occasions arise when councillors have to really make the difficult decisions, that an example like this is one that you want to look at in terms of how it needs to be, and you take your strength from that, because I'm sure you took a big whipping over that one. Councillor McPherson first, and then Councillor Brunet.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And under Councillor Inquiries, I just wanted to make mention of a fairly good discussion we had around some of the projects that the region is involved in, and that we are expecting regional representatives to come to the next the April infrastructure meeting. I thought that was pretty important under the Council Inquiries piece, and I didn't see it listed in the minutes. Of note were the King Street project in Vineland, as well as I believe the King Street from the traffic circle into the town of Beamsville. So I thought it was a good discussion that we had, and that should be noted here in the Councilor Inquiries. Thank you.
Are you you're suggesting to the clerk there should be an amendment? Okay, I think the clerk has that. Thank you very much, Councillor. Councillor Brunet.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to kind of reiterate Councillor Foster's comments. I think it would go without notice if we didn't recognize the fact that first thing the following morning, our communications director, Carrie Beattie, was all over that announcement going on the website with regards to the good news about our water report. So we were certainly communicating that across the municipality, and I wanted to thank Carrie for her due diligence on that. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Chair. I have a motion. I'm going to read it again now. Moved by Councillor Timmers, seconded by Councillor Brunet, that the minutes of the February 14th, 2018 Infrastructure Committee meeting be adopted. The recommendations as amended, therefore, therein be approved and acted upon. Pleasure on the motion. The motion is carried. Councillors, we have a report TR 1803. And this is a time-sensitive report regarding a provincial development charges rebate program that the town of Lincoln has been invited to participate in. And the report is included in your agenda packages. Are there any questions? There being none, Mr. Kirkopoulos, is there anything at all that could be reported by the staff, just for the benefit of the public who are observing this evening?
Through you, Madam Mayor, I did want to take the opportunity with Council's indulgence just to highlight that our town clerk, who has been with us since 2002, I believe, is leaving our organization and is taking on a new role as the CAO with the Township of Waynfleet. So I want to thank him for his years of service with our municipality. I know, and I think I said in the announcement that I sent out, which I have here before me, he will very much miss Lincoln and I think remain in a lot of ways part of our own DNA here in Lincoln. And so he's been a staple within the clerk's department. I know he's been a resource to council over those years, and he's been a strong advisor to many staff and many councils over those same periods of time. So I extend my sincere thank you on behalf of SMT to William. I wish him well in this new role. I've shared with him some of my own experiences as a new CAO. And what the job both entails, and it's loneliness at times, but the joys that it also provides. And so I wish William a farewell. He starts March 2nd. He will not be with us at the next council meeting we have, and so I'm not sure if our clerk / new CAO wants to provide some parting comments, but I turn the floor to him.
But I think first, before we do that, Mr. Kirkopoulos, that we don't normally, ladies and gentlemen, do any clapping at this table, but William has been here forever, right? And I think that we need to send him off with a grand clapping.
Thank you all very much. It has been an incredible time here. I've had the opportunity to work with some incredible councils, some incredible people, and again, there just aren't words for me to say, but thank you so very, very much. Thank you.
And of course, we'll be watching you, we'll be hearing everything from Mike, so I think it's just wonderful when people can achieve their dreams, even after they've been in one job for a long time. I certainly send you off with all good wishes, as we all do. Now, Mr. Kirkopoulos, my question really was in reference to the item around the Provincial Development Charges Rebate Program, and I was just wondering a few moments ago whether there was anything about this that needed to be reported or highlighted for people in the audience who might not understand what this was all about.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I don't believe there is anything. I mean, again, I'll turn it over to Kathleen to see if there's anything that she wants to share with council about that, and or Angela. There is a time pressing element to this, and that's why we brought it directly to council and are seeking to waive the rules to introduce this. But Angela can share a little bit of the program with you and why we're before you.
All right. Ms. Dale, do you have anything at all? Yeah, Ms. Savani?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Some of the highlights of this program is the province is offering up $125 million over the next 5 years, $25 million per year. 86 municipalities were invited, 8 within the local municipality area. So Lincoln was one of them because right now we have a 0 vacancy rate. So this will help address hopefully help address some of those issues regarding rental properties in the town of Lincoln.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Clerk, I want to, because this was put directly on the, this was put directly on without any preamble at all, is there anything in our procedure bylaw that requires us to, for council to vote to proceed with this motion?
Through you, Madam Mayor, because it was actually included on the agenda package, there is not a requirement to provide any suspension of rules or anything along those lines. It is one of the listed reports. As such, notice has been given both to members of council and the general public that it's being dealt with this evening, so there is no necessity of anything extraordinary in that regard.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the explanation. I have a motion moved by Councillor Timmers and seconded by Councillor Brunet that report TR 18-03 regarding the Provincial Development Charges Rebate Program be received as information, and that the council designate the Niagara region, being the housing service manager, as the program administrator, and that the Niagara region, as the housing service administrator, housing service manager, be directed to submit an expression of interest to the Ministry of Housing, and that the Niagara region, as the housing service manager, be authorized to enter into a transfer payment agreement with the Ministry of Housing Ontario on behalf of the town of Lincoln, and that the Niagara region, as the housing service manager, provide written confirmation from a person of appropriate authority of its willingness to act as program administrator on behalf of the town of Lincoln, and that the Niagara region, as the housing service manager, work with the town of Lincoln in determining rental housing development and units that are eligible to receive rebate funding under the Development Charges Rebate Program, planning approval timelines, and any municipal incentives that may be available. Councillors, are there any questions to the motion? Your pleasure on the motion? The motion is carried. We do not have a motion of compliance this evening with Section 34 of the Planning Act, and we have one bylaw. Moved by Councillor McMillan and seconded by Councillor Njima, that leave be given to introduce the following bylaw, number 2019-11, to discharge the terms and conditions of a site plan agreement executed under bylaw number 01-121, Elizabeth Novak and Ludmila Nicolette Novak. Are there any questions to the motion? Your pleasure on the motion. The motion is carried. I have a motion moved by Councillor Njima and seconded by Councillor Pachariva that bylaw number 2018-11, read a first time, be now read a second and third time and finally passed, and that the mayor and clerk sign and seal the said bylaw. Your pleasure on the motion? The motion is carried. Are there any councillor inquiries? Councillor Pachariva.
Yeah, thanks, Your Worship. Just wondering about our economic development meeting of December the 20th, 2017. We awarded the contract that night for the Camden Fire Hall, but in the discussions, staff were going to go back to the builder. We had kind of compromised on the design of a drive-through through the back, there was backing up. And just wondering if we have an update on where we're on that, because I saw in the minutes from the SRC committee a request for an update about the museum, and just wondering where we are on that, if you don't mind.
All right, Mr. Kirkopoulos.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I believe I did have a touch point meeting today with Director Brigantino, and I think she'll be bringing that forward to the next SRC, because we do have an update on that particular matter.
Okay, so the next, and that's during the month of March.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, thank you very much. Are there any notices of motion? Councillor Thompson, I recognize Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like at this time to provide notice of my intent to introduce a motion respecting the recent attention being given to the town of Pelham finances and the need for municipalities to work cooperatively to move a common agenda forward. I do have a copy of this motion prepared, and I have asked the clerk to place a copy at every councillor's desk this evening. I would also request that council's indulgence in suspending the notice provisions of council's procedure bylaw to permit the immediate consideration of this motion this evening. Madam Mayor, I've also moved this motion to that effect.
All right, thank you very much. Councillors, I have a motion before me to waive the provisions of council's procedure bylaw to permit consideration of this matter right now. This motion will require the support of not less than 2/3 of the members present to carry. If this procedure motion carries, we will consider Councillor Thompson's motion immediately. If we do not achieve 2/3 support for suspending the notice provisions of the procedure bylaw, then Councillor Thompson's motion will be considered at Council's next meeting on March 5th, 2018. Mr. Clerk, I'm requesting a recorded vote and ask that you take the roll call on this. Okay.
So the procedural motion reads as follows. Moved by Councillor Thompson, seconded by Councillor Foster, that in accordance with Section 2.4 of Town of Lincoln Procedure Bylaw 2016-40, Council does hereby suspend Section 11.3 of the Procedure Bylaw on this occasion to permit the immediate consideration of a motion for which notice has just been given. On that question, if members would indicate yay or nay to suspend the rule to permit it to be dealt with immediately. I will proceed in alphabetical order, concluding with the mayor. Councillor Brunet. Yay. Councillor Foster.
Yes.
Councillor McMillan.
Yes.
Councillor McPherson.
Yay.
Councillor Pachariva.
Yay.
Councillor Renchima.
Yes.
Councillor Thompson.
Yes.
Councillor Timmers.
Yes.
Mayor Easton.
Yes.
If you would like to call it, Madam Mayor, it's carried.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clerk. The motion is carried unanimously. And I have a motion before me moved by Councillor Thompson and seconded by Councillor Foster. Whereas there has been considerable attention from Niagara Region pertaining to the town of Pelham finances, and whereas on December the 11th, 2017, the City of Port Colborne's Council passed a motion stating they are strongly opposed to the resolution approved by Niagara Regional Council respecting the financial position of the town of Pelham. And similar motions have been passed by the councils of Thorold, St. Catharines, and Welland in recent weeks. And whereas regional government should work together with local area municipalities to move a common agenda forward, and whereas the town of Lincoln strives to uphold the independence of the town of Lincoln while involving the region of Niagara when required by the province and in our mutual best interest. And whereas it is encouraged that local residents work with local area councils to best address local area matters, And whereas it is important for staff from both the region and the local area municipalities to continue to work together. Now therefore be it resolved that the Council of the Town of Lincoln endorses Port Colborne's, Thorold's, St. Catharines, and Welland's motions, and be it further resolved that this motion be shared with Regional Council and all Niagara municipalities. Are there any questions or comments to the motion? Mr. Chair, Councillor Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to say I think it's very important that the lower tier municipalities let the region know that we are also in control of our finances, but we still need to be cooperative and work together. And I think this motion has laid that out very, very clearly. So thank you for entertaining this motion this evening.
Thank you. Councillor Foster.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Easton, and I want to start off by saying, I think we as a municipality walk the walk. We talk the talk and walk the walk, is clearly shown by the motion passed about 10 minutes ago concerning our relationship with the region concerning other items. I think it's really important to know and understand what the sphere of influence is and the sphere of jurisdiction that our municipalities and our various levels of government are supposed to have. The Municipal Act itself is really quite flexible, and I've come to appreciate it much more over the last while as I've been doing some additional studies with it. But I think it's really clear when it talks about sphere of jurisdiction within it. Municipalities and regional governments have to know and understand what they can or can't do. So I'm just really surprised that this has even got to this particular point in time. So I'm wholeheartedly supporting this motion, and I would like to see a recorded vote with this evening as well, too. Thank you.
Very good, Councillor. And Councillor Timmers.
Thank you, Mayor Easton. I just want to thank the councillors for bringing this motion forward. I support it 100%. I think we have to send a really strong message back to the region what the boundaries are, and I agree we need to be positive and work together, but they need to understand that we are an independent municipality and very capable, and we have to send that message back to them that we're not going to be directed in this way or told how we're going to manage our finances in our town. So thank you very much for the motion. I support it 100%.
Thank you. Councillor McMillan.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I too endorse the motion 100%. There are some very important issues within that motion, and there are a couple that just jump out at me, and I would like just to iterate those just for emphasis. And the one is that the region must work in concert with the municipalities. They can't be in opposition, and they can't be the critic. They have to work with us. The other one is that the region must recognize and be very sensitive to the independence of this council and all the other councils within the municipality. And in those two terms, our region is lacking at this point. So again, it is a strong message to go to them, and I endorse it 100%.
Thank you very much, Councillor. I think everyone's comments are very appropriate. The tone of this, in light of the motion that was supported by a majority on February the 8th, which sent the issue further on to the OMB, was something that I could not support. And I'm very pleased with the tone of this motion and the position that we're taking, because there is a great deal of necessity for us to work collaboratively with the region. But the most important operative word here is that we need to be very clear about where we're going and the deliberateness in which we are making decisions. And we do have a strong relationship with our community. And I think people are beginning to understand that that when they need to come and talk with us, it doesn't always mean that we can give everyone what they want, but we have tried to keep the door open so that those conversations can take place. And I believe that this is a great deal of part of the issue here. You have to be able to communities have to be able to deal with their elected officials, and it's not always easy. So thank you all for that, and I'll ask the clerk to call the vote.
On the motion, again, a recorded vote is being requested. I will proceed in alphabetical order, and I will not read the motion again, but you do have a copy in front of you. If you're in favor, please indicate yay. Councillor Brunet?
Yay.
Councillor Foster?
Yay.
Councillor McMillan?
Yes.
Councillor McPherson?
Yay.
Councillor Pachariva?
Yay.
Councillor Njima?
Yay.
Councillor Thompson?
Yay.
Councillor Timmers?
Yay.
Mayor Easton?
Yes.
And if you'd like to call that.
Thank you very much.
And again, carried unanimously.
Are there any announcements? Councillor Brunet?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just very quickly, more just an acknowledgement and a remembrance than an announcement. Over the last 3.5 years, I've had the opportunity to, through the transportation, spend quite a bit of time at the Niagara District Airport, as well as what was referred to as the Pelham Airport, and toured those airports and looked at the activities that are taking place. And so I wanted to acknowledge Dorothy Rungling. She was the first Canadian woman to hold an airline transport license. She was the first to solo a helicopter. She was named to the Order of Canada for the aviation accomplishments. In 1964, she became the first woman to sit on Pelham Town Council. In 2015, through an act of provincial legislation, Pelham's airport at that time was renamed the Niagara Central Dorothy Rungling Airport. And Dorothy passed away on Saturday at the age of 106.
Must have been that rarefied air.
You know, when we toured it a few years ago, we were all on a bus, and we got out, and, you know, her name is all over the airport and pictures, and I said to Mayor Augustine at the time, I said, so when did she pass? And he said, she's still alive and well, she's 104, and she just passed away on Saturday at 106. Yeah. One other thing, I wanted to thank Director Graham. I can't remember over the last 3 years getting as much negative comments on anything other than the Bartlett Railroad tracks and the crossing. And I know Director Graham has been working vigorously for the last 4 months to try to get something done over at those Bartlett tracks. And hooray, hooray, today, CN was out there and did a temporary repair. So thank you, Director Graham.
Very good. Thank you very much, Director Graham. Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And quickly, we are now in the process of drafting the Town of Lincoln Economic Development Strategy. And we are looking for public input, so you can go to lincoln.ca. This is our residents' opportunity to tell us how they see Lincoln growing and where we need to put our focus. So I would encourage all of our residents to go online and tell us what we need to be doing to grow our fine town. I also have the BAA monthly meeting is scheduled for this Thursday, and we are very excited to have, excuse me, Stephanie Hicks, our new executive director. This will be her first meeting, and I've seen the agenda. It is a packed agenda. I would encourage all of the BAA members to come out on Thursday, February 22nd at noon at Conversations and see what we have to talk about. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Timmers.
Thank you, Mayor Easton. Just really quick, I have 2 announcements. Tomorrow night at 20 Valley School will be the Village of Hope event. It is the Warm Your Heart to Hunger. There'll be 10 local chefs there cooking soup, and it's a soup cook-off. It starts at 5 o'clock, and all the proceeds are to the Village of Hope Emergency Fund. Also, this Saturday, February 24th, is the coldest night of the year walk. It will be at the Grimsby High School, and if you can come join us, join a team, come out and walk, or sponsor someone, that would be just fabulous. Thank you.
And Councillor, I want to encourage everyone to give as much as they can. I was very grateful to receive a check for $500 over the weekend. So that's going to help increase our numbers, but we need everybody's help, so do your best. If it's in an envelope, give it to Andrea and we'll get it entered. You don't have to go to any trouble. Always a good time. And also that night is the Ice Dogs. It's also an Ice Dogs game that night as well. So I know lots of people around the table have tickets. Okay. Mr. Clerk? I have a motion moved by Councillor Foster and seconded by Councillor Thompson that leave be given to introduce the following bylaw, number 2018-12, to adopt, confirm, and ratify matters dealt with by council resolution. Pleasure on the motion. The motion is carried. And a motion moved by Councillor Brunet and seconded by Councillor Timmers that bylaw number 2018-12 read a first time, be now read a second and third time, and finally passed, and that the mayor and clerk sign and seal the said bylaw. Pleasure on the motion. The motion is carried. Ladies and gentlemen, the agenda and orders of business have all been dealt with as circulated, and I declare this council meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.